on? Okay, so there's a reason. I'm so excited. I do admit that today, hi Haley. Keep trying to call you Chris again, and I know it's not right. But good morning. Today it's going to be a little bit different. I've been trying to do this whole long professional. Facebook Live is hard, just by the way. And I've been trying to do a production that requires 2 or 3 assistants. My husband explained to me that there was only one of me. So today I'm using pieces of paper, a microphone, and the camera, and that's it. Yes, you understand, Haley, how hard it is to get all those things together. So I will get started because being on time is important. I do want to say a quick prayer, not that it's not an important prayer, but there are 3 things that I pray that God will do for us through this message. And one is that His name will be glorified, that everything I say will be for His glory, and that it will be for our good and encourage any believers that will be listening to this. And third, I do ask that it would convict those who are lost and that they would seek after God. Okay, so I'm going to get started because people can catch up on the recording. So I'll get going. I do want to review for a few of new folks that might get in. This is part 2 of chapter 2 of our book by Martyn Lloyd-Jones called Let Not Your Heart Be Troubled. It is a book study of the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verses 1 through 12. If you have a copy of the book, I will be doing a lot of direct quotes from the book because, frankly, I figured Martyn Lloyd-Jones said it better than me restating it. So I want to get started. For me, the most startling statement I found in this chapter is found in the middle of page 33. It says, Martyn Lloyd-Jones says, to have a troubled heart means that you are not believing in God truly. There is something wrong in your belief. Otherwise, you would not be like that. After reading that statement, you know in your gut it's true. In fact, I'm sure I have even said similar statements myself. I'm sure that I have even given counsel to others myself of those same things. But believing it about yourself is a much different prospect than telling others what is wrong with them. That old splinter in the eye of your brother while you have a beam in your own eye kind of thing. I've come to realize saying something, even believing it enough to trust your life to it, it's different to believe it than to trust your life with it. And I think that is just what faith is. Hebrews 11:6 tells us that without faith it is impossible to please Him, for those who come to God must believe that He is. Which I found out later that is exactly what the author will be saying shortly. This verse also says that He is a rewarder of those who seek Him. And before this book, I would have defined faith, or at least I believed I could have defined faith. I would have quoted Hebrews 11:1 to anyone that asked me what faith was, which says, now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. But you know what? I would have left it there. After I thought all these thoughts, I turned the page in the book and discovered that Martyn Lloyd-Jones agreed with me, which was quite comforting. Lloyd-Jones continues this chapter defining what it is you must believe about God. First, he tells us that you must believe that God is, that there really is a God. But you can't just believe in any God. In spite of popular sayings and bumper stickers, all roads do not lead to heaven. All religions are not equal. In fact, we will explore that in chapters 8 and 9 of those 2 things. You must believe in the right God. You must believe in His existence and His self-existence. The God of the Bible is not a created being. Our God always was and always will be. He depends on nothing and no one. The theological term for this attribute is called, of God's self-existence, is called aseity. A-S-E-I-T-Y, aseity. It means that God's existence originates from and having no other source than itself. That God is self-existent falls right in line with God's eternality. He couldn't be one without being the other. Lloyd-Jones goes on to say we must also believe in God's omnipresence, omniscience, and his omnipotence. I want to give a brief reminder of the definition of those omni words. God is in all places at all times, inside and outside of our time-space existence. There is nothing that God doesn't know and understand completely, and there is nothing outside of God's power and ability. What was embarrassing to me as I remembered all those things is that I just did a bunch of YouTube lessons on those very attributes, yet I allowed one teeny, tiny, little, silly, invisible virus to knock those truths right out of my head. Martyn Lloyd-Jones goes on to instruct us to know, to really understand, that God is holy. Revelations tells us that God is holy, holy, holy. Let me read the words from Martyn Lloyd-Jones at the bottom of page 35. It's the bottom of page 35, kind of in the middle. Great terms are given in the Bible to describe this holiness. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. That's from 1 John 1:5. He is the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning, from James 1:17. For our God is a consuming fire. It's a quote from Hebrews 12:29. Those are the terms that are given, and they are all just an expression of utter, absolute holiness, entirely apart from sin. He not only tempts no one with evil, but neither can he be tempted. He is in eternal brightness and perfection and beauty. We must believe that about God. The next thing we must believe about God is that he is creator. There is nothing in heaven, on earth, or in our universe that exists that was not created, formed, designed by our God. Absolutely nothing. By now I'm sure that you have determined why it is necessary to believe these things in order to still our troubled hearts. Let's go back to our book, page 36, the italicized words in the middle of the page. If the secret of the quiet heart ultimately is to believe in God, then I must believe in addition that nothing happens apart from him, and that he is able to do everything, and that nothing is too hard for the Lord. That, in Reformed circles, and probably a few other, means that we must believe that God is sovereign. And ladies, that is my new goal in life. I want to so believe what I know intellectually about God that my life becomes defined by a calm spirit. I heard someone recently talking about John MacArthur, and one of the things they said about John MacArthur is that he was very calm. He just didn't have highs and lows. He was just calm. And I don't know the man. I've seen him once personally at a conference, but I don't know him. But everything I've seen of him, that seems to be the absolute truth, calm. And I want that to be, in my later life at least, an attribute that I develop. It's not now, because I'm like, up, down, up, down. So we want to work at calm because we know that our God is sovereign. Let's move forward. For those that have the book in hand, I hope this chapter wasn't as hard for you as it was for me. It took me 4 days to get through the first 8 chapters of this 8 pages of this chapter. And the second 8 pages were a little bit easier. Martyn Lloyd-Jones cautions that we must believe with God, that God, with him, nothing shall be impossible, and that includes belief in miracles. He gives the example of Abraham was ready to sacrifice Isaac because he believed that God is able to raise people even from the dead. That reminder of faith led me to remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who, when facing the fiery furnace, told Nebuchadnezzar, as recorded in Daniel 3:17, "If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king." I find that an amazing faith, just amazing. In my mind, personally, I'm sure I would have been standing in front of that furnace of fire with my knees knocking so hard you would have been able to hear them across the stadium, and I probably would have been wetting on myself at the same time. That was in faith in God. Next, Martyn Lloyd-Jones instructs us that we must believe what God has said about life, which basically means that we must believe the words in our scriptures. And in this, he talks directly about scripture addressing the problems that our life currently is throwing our way. In this case, the major disruption to our world, our life, our health, our freedom, and our finances by this stupid coronavirus. Let's read Lloyd-Jones's words on this subject in the middle of page 37. He writes, "I face my problem and I say, what is going to happen to this world? What is going to happen to me? And that raises another question in my mind. What is this world? What is this life of man? Why are things as they are at this present time? I cannot have a quiet heart without facing these problems. I must have some explanation. My heart cannot be quiet, in a sense, until my mind is satisfied. And the Bible answers my mind and gives me satisfaction in telling me these things about God." I get a drink. This is live. Our heart is given the ability to be calm when our mind understands what God's plan is for the world and for our life. And we learn about this plan, at least the important parts of this plan, through our Bibles. We learn about the creation of the world that was perfect. No death, no disease, no viruses. We learn about Satan's fall from heaven. We learn of the beginning of sin and death through the fall of mankind. We learn about a plan of redemption. And then we learn of redemption fulfilled in Jesus. We learn about our future state and the eternal promise of life restored through Christ. We learn that God has a plan. He always has a plan. That nothing happens outside of God's plan. Nothing. We learn about God's sovereignty. We learn that He allows many things to happen around us and to us. We also learn that nothing is outside of His control. We learn that God will restore order out of chaos that surrounds us. And this next point is very important for us to understand. He may not do it on our timetable. He may not do it according to our preferences. But God will execute His plan. And ladies, that plan is for our future and our hope. A glorious future and a great hope. It is seen throughout Scripture. In the end, we win. Well, actually, God wins. But we get to enjoy all the benefits of that victory, and we are even invited to the celebration party. Our current and frequent problem, my current and frequent problem, seems to be that we focus on the circumstances of the present world. We forget that we live in faith that is ours through Scripture. Martyn Lloyd-Jones says in the bottom of page 40, he says, "You see, we are in a difficult world where things are happening to us and upsetting our hearts. Since we are being troubled, what is the antidote? To believe in God, who has so loved me that He has counted the very hairs on my head. which is becoming a lot easier on my part, but that's a totally different subject. Scripture says, the scripture we're studying says, let not your heart be troubled. Believe in God. Even so, admit it, there are moments when we wonder, how can God shut down a whole planet? Millions of job losses in the U.S. and other parts of the world. Yesterday, for the United States only, over 23,000 people have died of this virus. Those are not numbers on a computer screen or data in somebody's little report. Those are real people. 23 plus thousand real people, real men, real women, real moms, real dads, real grandparents, brothers, sisters, husbands and wife, and even children. They're real people. That is a real loss. There is also very real loss of our personal freedom, some of which I doubt we will ever get back. How can any of that be good? How can that help us? How is that in God's plan? And here, I think that Martyn Lloyd-Jones must be a brother from a different mother, because as my mind was thinking of reasons why this mess is a good thing, why it is a God thing, Martyn Lloyd-Jones said it for me. Let's look at page 41 in the middle. Water break. Okay. How can these things possibly work to my good? Well, I cannot answer that in detail, but I can tell you something that will include every eventuality and possibility. If you really believe in God, anything that may happen to you will drive you nearer to God. And anything that drives you nearer to Him is a good thing for you. Let's be frank and honest. When life is running smoothly and easily and the sun is shining in the heavens and everything is going well, how easy it is to forget about God. We do not seem to need Him, and we forget Him, and we are far away from Him. But then something goes wrong. There's an announcement of war, or there is trouble or an accident, and these things drive us back to our knees. I then get nearer to God, and it is good for me because I have been afflicted, because before I was afflicted, I went astray. Each one of us can echo the sentiment of the psalmist. God sometimes has to chastise us in order to draw us a little nearer to Himself. I'm sure that you can testify of the same experience. Personally, in the last 4 or 5 years, I have gone personally from one trauma and stress to another trauma and stress. I've tried to die twice on my husband, very upsetting to him. I can also say that spiritually, I have grown more in the last 4 years than I did in the 30 plus years before that. I think many of you that listen to this are members of Grace Community Church in Tulsa and are memorizing or have memorized this year the book of James. So you are familiar with James 1, 2-4. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Believing in God means you believe in the power of God, the wisdom of God, the goodness of God, and the promises of God. One promise that I have held to as long as I can remember is a promise that God made to never leave me or forsake me. That's found in Hebrews 13, 5-6, and it's actually a quote from the Old Testament. So what is an attribute? Not an attribute. What is an antidote? Can't read my own writing. What is an antidote to a troubled heart? To believe in God. One last quote from Martyn Lloyd-Jones on page 43, the italics in the middle of the page. To believe in God means an utter, implicit confidence in what He has said about Himself and what He has said about what He will do. that basically finishes my summary of chapter 2. I hope everybody's doing well. I do want to mention that I will go into chapter 3, do the whole thing. I won't break it up into two parts. And that is believe in God, believe also in me, where Jesus is talking about telling his disciples and us through them to believe in him, to calm a troubled heart. And I will do that. Thank you, Haley, very much. I will do that next chapter, Friday, 10:30 a.m. We'll cover the whole entire chapter. And then next week, we're actually going to do 3 chapters next week. Well, I thank you. I am glad that it was an encouragement. I pray that God will keep you and your family safe. And I have been praying for those in our congregation, our friends and family who have been affected by this little virus. Yes, they are. You're absolutely right, Haley. I am, in fact, the people that I've specifically asked for prayer for, that are having the most trouble with their hearts are actually wrapped up in New Age teaching. It doesn't work. It absolutely doesn't. It only God, which we're going to study Friday. Okay, if there's no other questions, I will hit that little finish button, which I have found at the bottom of my screen, and I will, by God's grace, see everybody next Friday, 10:30. See ya.